On page 126 today for our notes, and we're going to use proportional reasoning to solve real life problems. Okay, so we have this first example. It says the ratio of cards to Deshawn owns to cards that Stephanie owns is 5-2. Now remember, when we have a ratio, that just means we have these little dots here, right? It's just like a fraction, like 5/2. The first one that comes up is the first number, so Deshawn's card is the 5 and Stephanie is the 2 cards. Okay, now Stephanie has 36 cards. It says, how will the ratio of Deshawn's cards to Stephanie's cards change if they both sell off half their cards? So there's two things we need to do. First, we need to figure out how many cards Deshawn has when Stephanie has 36. And so I would set up my proportion here, and they kind of already did it for us. But I would say, okay, Deshawn has 5 cards for every 2 cards that Stephanie has. I know that Stephanie has 36 cards, so I'm going to put that on the bottom of my fraction, so that way both of Stephanie's cards are on the bottom. And we don't know how many cards Deshawn has, so I'm going to call that D. I could call it X or whatever fun variable I want to do. Now I need to solve for D, so I'm going to multiply both sides by 36. And I can cross reduce here. 2 goes into itself 1 time, 2 goes into 36 18 times, and 18 times 5 is 90. So Deshawn has 90 cards when Stephanie has 36. Now the next part of the question is asking, what happens if we sell half the cards? Will it still be in proportion? So we're going to make this little table here. So the original proportion was 5/2. The new proportion is 90/36. And if we sell half, well, 90 divided by 2 is 45, and 36 divided by 2 is 18. So I need to decide, is 45/18 in proportion? So I need to reduce this fraction to see if it's the same as the other fractions. Well, 9 goes into both of those. 45 divided by 9 is 5. 18 divided by 9 is 2, which is 5 halves. So it's still in proportion because it is 5 halves when it's reduced. Just like 90/6 is 5 halves when reduced. Okay? So if they sell off half their cards, they will still be in proportion to each other. Now, for this next problem, they say, okay, after selling half their cards, they're each going to buy 9 more cards. And we want to decide if that is still in proportion. Well, if we do this, so Deshawn had 45 cards, plus he's going to add 9 more cards. And Stephanie had 18 cards, and she's going to add 9 cards to her total. Well, 45 plus 9 is going to be 54. And 18 plus 9 is going to be 27. And if we reduce that fraction, that's going to be 2/1, which is not in proportion because it's not the same as 5/2. Okay? So is the ratio of number of cards Deshawn has to Stephanie to the number Stephanie has? No. Or it's not in proportion. Okay? But the ratio is 2-1. Okay? Now the big question is, when we divided by 2, or we halved the number of cards, it was still in proportion. But when we just added more cards, it was not in proportion. Okay? So the convince me says, why did the ratio stay the same in the example, but I'm going to try it? That's because if we use multiplication or division, it will stay in proportion. Addition, subtraction will not stay in proportion. Okay? And feel free, you can pause this video anytime to catch up, okay? All right, moving on here. So if we're going to look at ages of people, so we have Martin is 6 years old when Cassandra is 3. So we have this little table when Martin's 6, Cassandra is 3. It says, how old will Martin be when Cassandra is 6? And then we want to decide if this is in proportion or not, okay? Well, if we add a year each time here, okay, you can see, well, if we do 3/6, that's 1/2. But 4/7 is not equal to 1/2, right? So we can't use proportional reasoning to figure out their ages. We just can add their numbers every time, right? There's not a proportion that we could set up to figure that out, okay? So anytime we're talking about adding or subtracting in something, it's not going to be proportional, okay? If we look at this next problem, it says a video streaming service charged Brian $143.84 for a full year of access. Brian thinks he was not charged the correct amount. What should Brian say when he calls customer service? So there's 2 ways we could look at this problem. We know right now that it's $8.99 a month based on the poster to get a streaming service. Well, if that's my constant of proportionality, so I could set up my equation, y equals $8.99 times x. Well, 1 year is 12 months, so I'm going to times it by 12, and that cost me $107.88. And if I subtract that from what I was charged, I was overcharged by $35.96. Okay? One of the questions asked in class was, what about tax? We're just not worried about tax right now. It would still, even if we were charged tax, it's still overcharging us. So you could call the credit card company and say, hey, I was overcharged by $35.96. Another way you could do it is say, okay, well, I know I was charged $143.84, and that's our y value. That's the total cost, so I'm going to plug that in for y. And then if I solve for x by dividing by $8.99, I get 16 months. So I could call the credit card company and say, hey, I was charged for 16 months. I would like to have my 4 months free without being charged. Okay? So 2 different ways to look at it and prove that he was overcharged. I wouldn't care which way you would prove it. Okay? All right, if we look at the try here, it says a florist makes bouquets that include 50 white flowers and 7 red flowers. So we're going to be comparing white flowers to red flowers, okay? And the white flowers right now is 50 to 70. That's what we need to make one full bouquet, okay? Valentine's Day is on its way, and that's what we need. It says if the florist orders 1,050 white flowers and 140 red flowers, there will be leftover flowers, okay? We don't want that. That's wasteful, right? It says how can the florist adjust the order so that there are no leftover flowers? Well, I know right now this is what I have. Okay, and there's many, many answers to this question, but I'm just going to show you 2, okay? Well, I know that 50 goes into 1,050, and if I do 1,050 divided by 50, that's 21. So I would have to multiply this top by 21 to get 1,050. Well, whatever I do at the bottom, I must do the top, or vice versa. And 7 times 21 is actually 147. So one answer to this problem could be I need to order 7 more red flowers. Okay. Another way to look at this is if we had 50 over 70 and 1,050 and 140, I know that 7 evenly goes into 140. And 140 divided by 7 is in fact 20, so I'd have to multiply by 20. And I'd have to multiply by 20 on the top, which would mean I would have 1,000 white flowers. So I could say, hey, I'm not going to order 50 white flowers. Okay. So again, more than one answer to that question, and I would accept either on the test as long as you were mathematically sound. If you have more questions, feel free to email me. Have a wonderful day. Bye.